The infected blood scandal, it's something that I take quite personally. I'm incredibly lucky. I'm on the haemophilia scale myself. There was every possibility I could have been infected. I don't think I was. And so I don't, I'm not asking for any money, but I know people who are, and I know people who have been infected, and I know people who have died in the process. And the infected blood scandal stands as one of the great failures of the NHS. Over 30,000 people were infected with HIV and hepatitis C because of the contaminated blood products, resulting in the death of over 3,000 people. After decades of suffering, the government finally promised interim compensation payments by Christmas of 2024, yet letters now inform bereaved families of additional bureaucratic delay. It's not a simple administrative hiccup, it's a pattern. From Windrush to Grenfell Tower, from Andrew Malkinson's wrongful conviction to the Post Office Horizon IT scandal, the British state has a grim tradition now of compounding the suffering of its victims through delay, mismanagement, and contempt. And it's then passed on to ordinary people. How many times have you lent somebody some money and it's never come back? There's always an excuse. Why? Because the example is set by the state. And the state might say, oh, you have a duty. You have a duty to be a whistleblower if you see something wrong. For example, in the NHS, you have a duty as a whistleblower to call it out. And yet the state will ensure that with a combination of political arm twisting and legal machinations, dragging people through the law courts, pressuring them in their own job so that their job pretty well disappears or they go mad, that, what started off as a simple whistleblowing operation becomes a struggle not only to survive in the job, but more likely a struggle to survive at all. You only have to talk to people in Doctors for Justice. This is a pattern of delay and contempt for the victims, a pattern of taking people for a ride. And it's about power, and it's about who actually has got hold of the money. It may be your money, but the government's got it. And there is a simple word for this, isn't there? It's called theft. And the infected blood inquiry itself, led by Sir Brian Langstoff, unveiled downright deception by the authorities, including the destruction of key documents, the half-truths told to patients. While $11.8 billion in compensation has been announced, victims' families now face Kafkaesque demands, proof of legal beneficiary status, correcting names from Judy to Judith, often after assurances that such errors would not impede payments. This echoes the bureaucratic contempt seen in other scandals like Windrush. Windrush families faced deportations and years-long delays in compensation, despite the government acknowledgement of its role in the disaster. The survivors of the Grenfell Tower still await justice as they wrestle with inadequate rehousing and bureaucratic delays. Andrew Malkinson, wrongly imprisoned for 17 years, endured years of ignored pleas for justice despite DNA evidence exonerating him, and even after he was awarded a payout, it was delayed and delayed and delayed. Victims of the Horizon IT scandal were prosecuted based on flawed evidence, only to face delays and delays and delays in compensation, even after their innocence was proven. And the obfuscation between the word compensation and the restitution of the money that was stolen. People should be reimbursed and then compensated, and apologies offered. But instead, the state seems far keener, because it's cheaper, to finger point and say, this is where the blame is. Oh, let's have an inquiry. Let's waste a bit more money. The sentiment that the government is stalling to avoid payouts is painfully familiar. Infected blood victims speak of dwindling hope as they age, face terminal illnesses, brought on partly because of the stupidity of the NHS or struggle with the psychological trauma of decades-long neglect. This was echoed by Grenfell survivors, fearing they wouldn't live to see justice, by Windrush victims, many of whom died before receiving compensation. The victims describe sleepless nights, anxiety, deteriorating health as delays continue, and a recent survey revealed that 93% of infected blood victims feel the government's inaction is worsening their mental health, with 54% reporting physical impacts of this neglect. This is a crisis of human dignity, and it is something that could be avoided, and it is something that the present government and the previous government is directly responsible for causing. Each new administrative burden or technical requirement seems designed to obfuscate rather than to assist. The Haemophilia Society has rightly called this unacceptably cruel, mirroring calls for other advocacy groups across these scandals for independent oversight and expedited compensation. And we must demand the rapid establishment of full operational compensational authority overseen by an independent body to ensure transparency and justice. Lessons must be learned from all these past failures to simplify the process. Compensation should be swift, with minimal administrative burdens. People shouldn't have to genuflect, prostrate in front of the authorities to prove that they are worthy of compensation. No, it should be the other way round. The authorities should be seeking them out to apologize. We must ensure accountability. The destruction of documents, the pussyfooting by officials should result in criminal liability. And we should respect the victims. Mental health support. There's no point in wheeling out all these mantras about mental health support if this is how we treat people who have been victimized by the state. Mental health support must be free and immediate. It must be offered to affected families now. And people who come here who have been abused and tortured and seek asylum, why are they not offered mental health support immediately? Because they aren't, by the way. They aren't. Again, it's all this, on the one hand there's lots of talking, on the other hand there's no action. We want the world to respect us as a centre of care. But actually the reality is it's a centre of wordplay and rhetoric, and we get caught in this labyrinth of words. The infected blood scandal is not merely a tragedy of the past, it's a living indictment of a systemic failure of the government. Without action, we are perpetuating a cycle of cruelty, consigning justice to yet another bureaucratic limbo, and it is disgusting, disgusting, disgusting. And the present government now shoulders the burden of accepting responsibility for that, because no one else will. I think we must immediately write to Wes Streeting and ask him what he's doing. Because posturing about assisted dying is no good when people really are dying because of his neglect and because of his department's inaction and obfuscation and delaying tactics.